Captain Wild Bill Wichrowski endured the most deadly storms the Bering Sea could bring for decades. A legend who led his crew and boat through chaos, storm, and ice, he was a master of the waters. But the tempest that was building inside of him was the one he never anticipated. A man's greatest struggle would be against an invisible foe if he were to defeat every monster the ocean produced. An adversary who would compel him to make a decision that would permanently alter his life and most deadly catch. The FV Summer Bay's rolling icy decks are not where the story starts. It starts in a much more spooky, colder, and quieter place. Deadliest Catch accomplished something that it doesn't often do at the conclusion of Season 19. It followed Captain Bill out of the perilous waters of Alaska and into the quiet, sterile corridors of an oncology unit. The customary sounds of crashing waves and yelling deck personnel were replaced by the gentle hum of medical equipment. This new environment was shocking to viewers accustomed to seeing Bill in total control. He was no longer in charge of a powerful ship, a man who awaited the news that would put an end to everything. Bill, who is well known for his loud voice and straightforward demeanor, sat calmly while the camera watched him await the results of his tests. No thaw on the Bering Sea could compare to the strain. Then, with words that were more powerful than any rogue wave, the doctor gave the verdict. It wasn't simply cancer, the doctor explained, looking at him and saying bluntly, "You do have prostate cancer, and it needs to be treated right away." It was a severe version of the illness. The battle has to begin at once. Time was of the essence. For a man whose life was governed by quotas and seasons, physicians and treatments now controlled his calendar. His greatest obstacle had always been the ocean. The oceans could never do what a microscopic adversary now threatened to do. What is the reaction of a man who has never given up a fight to such news? Captain Wild Bill's initial reaction was one of defiance rather than fear. "I'm not going to stop fishing," was one of his first thoughts upon hearing the diagnosis. He realized that many individuals who receive a diagnosis like this simply shut down and withdraw into themselves. "I'm going to keep going until I actually can't." And he thought that only made matters worse. He refused to allow his work or identity be defined by the illness. This was not going to tame the Wild Bill persona that had been cultivated over decades of adversity and peril. He made the decision to wage this conflict according to his own rules, and it meant going back to his boat's deck in the middle of the Bering Sea, the one spot where he felt most alive. He was fighting for more than just his life. He was defending the persona he had worked so hard to develop. Few people would choose to return to the Bering Sea while beginning intensive cancer treatment. Bill acknowledged that doctors treat you like you've gone crazy when you tell them you want to go fishing while receiving treatment. The world of crab fishing, which required ruthless physical effort and total seclusion from medical care, was in direct opposition to the medical community, which wanted stability and rest. Bill, however, was certain. He was aware that the path ahead would be extremely challenging. He publicly stated that the upcoming 4, 6, and 8 months would not be enjoyable. His body was at its weakest, and he was about to go on the most deadly task on the planet, a risk that would put all of his strength and will to the test. The actual therapy was an unrelenting, unseen conflict. Bill told his supporters about it on social media, stating that he was receiving treatment with hormones and radioactive seeds. To target the cancer, radioactive seeds were inserted within his body. Straight. The goal of the hormone treatment was to prevent the cancer from spreading, but it was quite expensive. According to Bill, the goal of the treatment was to bring his testosterone levels down to almost nothing. This would be a challenging process for any man, but for a crab boat captain whose survival depends on strength and energy, it would be extremely challenging. It was disastrous. The effects hit him almost instantly. He wrote that the hormones were not giving him any energy. It was draining this formidable, larger-than-life character from the inside out. He gave his people a devastating thought. Throughout all the pain and exhaustion, a new mission began to form in Bill's mind. He writes, "I have always felt 10 to 15 years younger than my age. The job I have, and being around a crew half my age, feels like the clock has caught up." The very treatment that was saving his life was also stealing the vitality that had defined him for so long. He chose to let the deadly catch cameras to follow him all the way from the doctor's office to the summer bay deck, after realizing that his fight might serve a greater good. "I'll be honest," he added. "Publicly disclosing the diagnosis is a little strange. In an effort to persuade some others to be tested, I'm prepared to share it publicly so that others can witness the trip. In order to prevent other men from suffering the same fate, this tough private man decided to be vulnerable in front of millions of people." He articulated his new objective succinctly and effectively. "If I can help save 1 or 2 people on this planet, that's a good thing. You have to understand the man who lived it to understand why Bill tried so hard to stay on the water." The captain, who had previously measured success in pounds of crab, now measured it in lives he could potentially save. He was using his fame for good rather than glory. Growing up in Irwin, Pennsylvania, a town east of Pittsburgh, Bill Wichrowski's path to the captain's chair was a long and difficult one. He joined the Navy in 1975 after graduating from Norrin High School, where he developed a taste for the sea. After leaving, the prospect of large profits in Alaska's king crab industry drew him to the Bering Sea. The sea was in his blood. He had spent his entire adult life on the water, earning a reputation as one of the fleet's toughest and most skilled fishermen. He worked his way up the ladder for 20 years, starting as a greenhorn and eventually rising to the rank of captain through sheer grit and hard work. This was long before any TV cameras were there to document the drama. His boat wasn't just a place of work, it was the result of a lifetime of sacrifice and hard work. His nickname, Wild Bill, wasn't just a catchy television moniker. He earned it back in high school when he joked that it probably should have been Stupid Bill. He told stories of doing crazy things like diving through ice to swim the length of a pool underwater and climbing between 2 moving cars on a freeway. However, in the lawless world of the Bering Sea, the name became more serious and intimidating as he grew older. Jonathan Hillstrand, his fellow captain, once related a story about how crazy Bill could be. Some of his crew got into a huge fight in town, injuring several people so severely they had to go to the hospital. It would have been financially disastrous for the town to ban Bill's boat, so he came down with his AR-15, fired a few rounds out the window to get everyone's attention, told them to put their hands on a table, and then used the stock of his gun to break anyone's hands that had blood on them. This was the man who commanded respect through both skill and fear. Before becoming a reality TV star, Bill had already lived a full life at sea. By 2005, after decades in the harsh Alaskan waters, he made the decision to semi-retire. It was a brutal act of what Hillstrand called marine law, a way of maintaining order in a place that had none. He relocated to Mexico and Costa Rica to operate sport fishing tours, but when the economy faltered, he was left wondering what to do next. At the same time, a show called Deadliest Catch was gaining enormous popularity, so Bill saw an opening and kept in touch with his old fishing friends before reaching out to Discovery as the show's popularity grew. During the 6th season of the show in 2010, he made his debut in the Titan N. Behind the harsh demeanor was a guy with a personal life full of its own struggles. Bill is married to his wife, Karen Gillis, whom he credits with being his support during his cancer treatment. He introduced his fierce, non-nonsense attitude to millions of viewers by competing against the Deadliest Catch captains. He has 3 children, 2 sons named Zach and Jake, and a daughter named Delea. His relationship with his son, Zach Wilson, was frequently a source of drama on the show. He was absent for a large portion of Zach's childhood and spent most of his time at sea. He wrote on Facebook that she keeps me in line and put up with a lot over the past few months. The tension between father and son reached a breaking point when Zach left his father's boat to work for a rival captain, Shaw Dwyer, in season 13. Bill had hoped to establish a relationship with Zach when he brought him onto his boat as a greenhorn, but the two frequently clashed, with viewers witnessing him push his son and occasionally reprimand him for being too much like his mother, a criticism that stung deeply considering Bill's absence during his upbringing. Bill's life was more than fishing and family drama, and even when he gave Zach opportunities to step up, like taking control of the wheelhouse, he was frequently disappointed when his son didn't take the initiative. The next season, things became even more tense when Shaw bought Fishing Quotota out from underneath Bill, igniting a professional rivalry fueled by personal history. He put his fame to good use, traveling all the time during the off-season to attend NASCAR events and fishing tournaments, and he became an enthusiastic supporter of charities, particularly those that aid veterans, such as the Wounded Warrior Project, which he felt was very important to him as a Navy veteran. The sea is a place of constant hardship, but he found a new purpose in using his fame to make a difference, taking wounded veterans out on sport fishing trips and giving them a brief escape from their struggles after he was told by a Discovery executive that he would have a voice people would listen to. And tragedy also characterized Bill's time on the show. In 2020, at the age of 33, he lost his deck boss, Nick Mclashen, whom he regarded as a son, to a drug overdose, which was a devastating blow. The loss of his trusted right-hand man, a man he was mentoring, added even more sorrow to a life already characterized by hardship and sacrifice. As his body struggled with the effects of his cancer treatment, Bill fought a war on two fronts throughout season 20. He pushed himself to the limit, determined to finish the season and prove that he could overcome this, but his body was giving him warning signs. He was out at sea, miles from any hospital, and his doctor called him with the harsh and frightening news that he had an operation he needed to have in a few days, and that if he didn't show up for his next appointment, he might be sentenced to death. His energy was low, and the physical toll was becoming apparent, but then the moment that changed everything arrived. For the first time, a doctor's warning was overriding the captain's orders, and it was a warning he could not ignore. His defiance had finally reached an impenetrable wall, and he could no longer ignore the reality of his situation. The decision was painful, but it was obvious. Bill had never given up in his more than 40-year career, telling his crew, "I haven't missed a season's conclusion in 40 years. Never once have I left in the middle." One of the most poignant scenes in the show's history was when he gathered his staff and made his exit announcement, his voice laden with the weight of his decision. He turned to his trusted deck supervisor, Landon Cheney, and turned over the helm of the FV Summer Bay, saying, "To be honest, I couldn't think of a better guy to leave the boat with." He knew he had to leave, but he couldn't just leave his men and his ship. It was a long demonstration of leadership and trust. He wasn't merely a patient heading out for treatment at that precise moment. As a captain, he made sure his ship was in capable hands. He was leaving the life he had spent the previous 40 years in, to fight a different kind of combat, not in loss, the future of his own. The much-anticipated news finally arrived after he left the Summer Bay and concentrated on his health. Bill posted an update on Facebook to his fans. "Happy to say," he wrote, "numbers are great." Then came the words that everyone was waiting to hear. "I appeared to have recovered from cancer." There was a great sense of relief among his fans. Wild Bill had triumphed against his most deadly opponents to date, but he was also forthright about the cost of his success. He considered the cost of the battle in the same post Le had taken. He said that the battle with cancer and the difficult treatments made him feel as though the clock had finally caught up, after a lifetime of feeling younger than his years. "Perhaps it's a tiny price to pay for his life," he said. The war had left its scars, but he had won it. In addition to being a survivor, he was permanently altered. Every fan was wondering, when will Wild Bill return to Deadliest catch as his health improved? And the answer was unexpected. An official announcement was made by a Discovery Channel representative ahead of the 20th season of the show. The upcoming season will not include Captain Wild Bill Wichrowski. His tenure on the show came to an end after almost 10 years. Although no formal explanation was provided, it was obvious that Bill was making the decision to put his future and health first. That was where the man who had once declared he would fish until he was unable to do so was. An era for the show came to an end with his departure. He was a real trailblazer from an era before reality TV and one of the last leaders of the old guard. His departure was the last sensible step in his path, not a tragic conclusion. He was taking his life back for himself after giving it to the water. The tale of Captain Wild Bill Wichrowski is one of extraordinary fortitude on and off the water. He was a brave skipper who attracted millions of viewers and the admiration of his crew. However, a different kind of strength was displayed in his last chapter on the deadliest catch. It demonstrated the fortitude to put one's life before one's career, the insight to seek assistance, and the courage to be vulnerable. Even though he left the program, his legacy as a leader, a fighter, and an inspiration will endure. Crab catching was not the purpose of his last expedition. Catching a second opportunity at life was the main goal. That was the biggest win he ever had.